Is U.S. President Joe Biden in trouble? We learned this Monday that classified documents had been found at a former office used by him in Washington, D.C. right before the midterm elections last year. He was using the office after leaving the Obama administration as vice president. Late in the week, it turned out that a second batch of classified documents was found in his private home. Now, U.S. Attorney General has assigned the U.S. Attorney in Chicago to investigate the matter. It's unsure whether there will be a criminal investigation, but what looks potentially like a scandal has drawn criticism from Republicans. The president and the White House have yet to comment on the matter. So what would they explain? How would they explain that? And how far could the story go? I'm pleased to be joined by Blackburn-Dwyer, president of Grasshopper Strategies from Philadelphia. I'm pleased to be joined in the middle of the night by Harvey Dzodin, senior research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, a think tank. Thank you very much for joining me at this inconvenient hour. And last but not least, Margaret Kimberley on the line, executive editor and senior columnist of Black Agenda Report, an online platform that provides news commentary and analysis representing the Black left. So welcome to all of you on The Point. So the U.S. Presidential Records Act establishes that presidential records automatically transfer into the legal custody of the archivist as soon as the president leaves office. It also requires that vice presidential records be treated in the same way as presidential records. So Harvey, help us understand the potential legal implications of the revelations.
Well, it's clear that Biden did have some documents, but I would say that you have to compare and contrast this case with how President Trump behaved. The reason is that when Biden's documents were discovered at his University of Pennsylvania think tank, the National Archives, the custodian of records, and the Justice Department were immediately called. And the same for a few days later when more documents were discovered at Biden's home. So yes, it seems to, if you look at the terms of the law, it seems to be a violation of the law. But in Biden's case, he seems to have done everything that he could do after the fact to cooperate with the powers that be. That's so different from Trump's case. Trump had hundreds of documents that he kept. He said they were his documents. He or his people lied, his lawyers lied, in saying that all the documents were released and so on. So it took FBI raid and FBI visits to Mar-a-Lago to get those documents. And I don't think there's any surety yet that all of Trump's documents have been given up to the National Archives. So in short, both people have liability, but I think it's a matter of not apples and oranges, but apples and apples. So Golden Delicious and Granny Smith, but the Trump's in much bigger trouble than Biden legally. But politically, you have to also say that Biden's now in trouble because this is a great diversion for Biden, and the Republicans are going to turn this into a game, into a circus, and they already have started to do that.
Brendan, another key question here is why it's reported that the Biden administration seemed to have waited over 2 months to make it public, or that it went public, whether they made it public or not. And Biden's attorneys found the classified documents in November last year, which is less than a week prior to the midterm elections, although his attorneys voluntarily turned in the document over the day after finding them. What do you make of the timing or the delay of the revolution or the disclosure of the discovery to the public?
I think it kind of goes to your first question. What's the legal implication versus what's the public opinion implication? From a legal perspective, the way this seems to have been handled by the Biden administration was completely the right way to do it. This isn't usually something that needs to be disclosed to the public. It isn't necessarily something that we would, quote unquote, cover up. But when you're talking about a handful of classified documents that there hasn't been an assessment about how damaging they are, or were they really at risk, or were they literally just, in a stack of papers that somebody left an office with, and one in the middle was a classified one, that is usually an administrative dealing. Whether you're a low-level staffer at the CIA or the Pentagon, or whether you're the vice president, literally there'd be an administrative review. What was the risk? What was the document? Was there any ill intent? And basically, do you just get a, hey, please don't do that, I'm glad they're back? And that was what the Biden administration and his private lawyers seem to have treated this as. So there wasn't a need or necessarily a responsibility to report it to the public from a legal perspective. And in the end, it was CBS News that uncovered this story, forcing this into the public eye, which is exactly what media is supposed to do. From a public opinion perspective, this is going to be one of the talking points for the Republicans. They're going to say, oh, they covered it up. Oh, they delayed too long. I would tend to agree that this is an administrative matter. The compare and contrast is obviously, well, why was it so public with President Trump? And that issue really only became public after President Trump refused repeatedly to cooperate with run-of-the-mill requests from the National Archivist, then a subpoena, then threats about a raid, and then needing for a raid. That really only elevated to a public concern once President Trump dug in his heels. So with President Biden and his private attorneys cooperating from the beginning, this should have been or could have been handled just on an administrative level of a, great, we did a threat assessment, we looked at these, no ill intent, or presumably no ill intent, I don't want to get ahead of the investigation, and it would have just been sort of handled, shall we say, off stage.
All right. Margaret on the line, what is your take of whether there is any other reason that we only know about the case now, months after the documents were discovered? Were any possible consideration given to not to influence public opinion right before the midterm elections?
Well, we're guessing, of course, but I would say that that's quite plausible. This has to have been, this is embarrassing for the Biden administration. This whole issue was, it was portrayed as something that was unique to Donald Trump, something only he would do. Once again, Trump treated as this outlier who does things that no other president does. And for Biden to have been found in the same circumstance of having documents he should not have had in his office or in his home, it lessens the case against Trump. But politically, I don't think it will matter. I think most people have made up their minds about how they feel about both men. And those people who want to scorn Trump are going to do so anyway. And people who tend to defend Biden will still defend him. But I think the lesson here is, despite those things that do make Trump different from other presidents, it is not wise to act as if he's this terrible outlier and he does these things that no one else does, because whether inadvertent or not, this was something Biden should not have done. He and his staff were not following the law, were not following the Public Records Act, which is why late today the Attorney General appointed a special prosecutor.
How far would the story go, Harvey, according to your understanding? I mean, definitely the Republicans will seize the opportunity to try to find as much accountability and transparency as possible, and those who have made up their mind about Biden will not let this case go easily. What is your take on the possible lengths this is going, or the noise, the scale of the noise?
I think this is just another element, Ken, of what the Republicans are planning to do in the House of Representatives now that they have control by a few votes. And, 149 years ago, the Republicans adopted the symbol of the elephant as the symbol of their party. And I think this is a very timely thing now, because what the Republicans are going to do and have said they're going to do and are starting to do, and this is just going to be one element of it, is to create a political and media circus. The problem with this circus is that there's not going to be a bunch of men or women who are going to be cleaning up after the elephants in that circus. So we're going to have a showtime for 24 months now by the Republicans, trying to demonize Biden's son, the papers, a lot of issues that most of which are not very consequential. So I think this is just another piece of ammunition for them, but I think it's the most inconsequential piece. And I think that it's also very sad that when United States and China should be working together to be tackling climate change and to go after pandemics and international public health, that the Republicans are focused on creating this circus. It doesn't bode well for America. It doesn't bode well for the world. And frankly, I'm worried about the paralysis and of the next 2 years.
Another angle to look at this really, if you are holding one of the highest offices in the United States, which is one of the highest offices, most powerful places in the world, you are going to behave according to the highest standards, both morally, ethically, administratively, you know, in terms of abiding by the rules. Could it have been that he just forgot, or that his staff, just out of negligence or incompetence, didn't handle this well? Regardless of partisan politics, will there be transparency? Will there be accountability? Brandon?
I think there will be accountability based along, from a legal perspective, based along precedent. And I agree with you. If you're president, you're vice president, or you're former president, you should be held to a higher standard. We should not brush this under the rug. We should not just say, oh, it's fine that he did this. It is technically against the law. It is a threat. It is classified documents. Even if we talk about classified documents not all needing to be classified, still classified documents, still the rules, right? People make mistakes. Large organizations, tons and tons of boxes, people make mistakes. I was listening to an expert today talking about the extent of Pentagon staffers that accidentally take home a classified document once in a while. These things happen. I'm not saying that they're not wrong, and people have been fired over it, but other people have just been given a slap on the wrist. So a lot of the question will come down to, is this a slap on the wrist situation, or is this more serious? And that will come down to what's in the documents, I believe, and if there's ever any discovery of an intent to deceive either by President Trump or President Biden in this circumstance. In that case, we then get into more serious accountability. But what we should say from a legal perspective is this is mostly an administrative problem.
All right. Well, that is according to
the prosecutor.
Yeah, that is.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that is according to the information and the information that is accessible for now, and also our personal opinion. Speculation may be a little bit as well for the moment. But many thanks to my guest, Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, president of Grasshopper Strategies, Harvey Dzodin, research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, and on the line, Margaret Kimberley, executive editor and senior columnist of Black Agenda Report. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, the United States reiterates that China is the greatest challenge to the United States in the year 2023. Where does that lead us in the new year? Stay with us.